All right. Hello, the Florida Wrestling Room, Ward Wrestling Live, Wrestling Nation, Wrestling Worldwide. Thanks again for everybody's support. I have another great Florida wrestling legend here in Coach Mike Schyck. He was a wrestler at Lemon Bay, actually won 2 state championships there, placed 4 times, and has since come home, and he is the Lemon Bay High School coach now. Ohio State University 2-time All-American. So that's tremendous. And then he just decided back in 2013 that he felt like he had the wrestling bug, and he ended up at the Veterans World Championships and just happened to take gold there twice. So unbelievable. Thanks for coming on, Coach. What have you been doing during this time to kind of stay active and to keep your kids active? And again, I appreciate this.
Well, I appreciate. Thank you for having me on. Been watching you from afar here and doing great stuff here in Florida. But what I've been doing, I think on the 12th or 13th of March, I ended up getting 3 sections of one of our wrestling mats, and I got it on my back patio. So wrestling's still been. I mean, I can look out my window right now and it's right here, but I mean, we've still been close to it, my son and I. So we're doing the same things that we would probably be doing if it was over at the school in the restroom. We're just doing it out back, different location. But still been working, still been, trying to maximize our time. We got a lot of free time right now.
Absolutely. And I know you mentioned rolling around with your son. He's obviously had a tremendous 4 years in high school, right? And is he done with high school now?
No, he's right now he's in his sophomore year. They got another week and a half before they finish up school, so he's got 2 years left.
Oh, so sophomore. So I read that it just seemed like he was winning so much. I read that. So his name is Lance, correct?
Yeah, Lance Schyck. Yep, he's jumped into the sport. Football was his first love. He's been playing football, Pop Warner football, and I played a year of JV at the high school, but he played Pop Warner for 9 years and really didn't jump into the wrestling. He kind of followed me around when I went and did camps. I did camps with Ken Cherto, one of my former coaches at Ohio State, and then I've done some clinics here and there, brought some people in like Jordan Burroughs, and I think I had Ben Askren and Logan Stieber. And I mean, he's been doing stuff. He's been with it. But then after his 7th grade year, he decided he wanted to jump into it. And he jumped into it, jumped right into the deep end right away, because that was my first year taking over as coach at my alma mater. And as soon as I jumped in, I started raising a bunch of money to invest in the kids and sending them to camps and traveling with them. And I sent 8 kids to the 28-day intensive training camp with Jay Robinson. And so the camp is for 14 to 17-year-olds. If you look on the the guidelines of the camp, but I know Jay and reached out to him and asked him if my son could come up and as a 13-year-old. And so he went after his 7th grade year and did the 28 days, and he was one of 6 of my 8 guys that graduated and got his I Did It shirt and did the 15 miles the last day of camp. And so he jumped into the deep end right away.
Yeah, I'd love to get, there was a lot of plans for Daniel during the off season. Hopefully we can still get some of that in after this is all said and done. I did reach out to J-Rob. They kind of have a middle person that communicates between him and me. And they had signed up to come on because they were putting together a virtual camp, but then that kind of fell through. So they reached out today and said maybe they'll come on in the fall or something once wrestling starts up again. But yeah, from what I understand, it's the best of the best.
Yeah, you know what? I went back in 1984. It was like the 6th or 7th year that they had done the camp. Now early on, it was with Dan Gable and Jay Robinson were together, and then Jay left and went to Minnesota. So brought it up to Minnesota. But I always told myself that if I ever have a kid that's going to get into wrestling, whether he's going to wrestle or not, I think it's a great thing for someone to do, because of, most kids don't get exposed to something as difficult where they're doing that type of suffering. And I just think that there's benefits that, what your capacity is, what you can handle, what you can do, and just the mental side of things. I know people have different philosophies in terms of training. I mean, if it's just wrestling related and you want to get better at wrestling, you don't need to do all the running and all that. But there's to experience that, I mean, was a game changer for me. I vowed never to go back after I went the first year, and I went back 2 more times, and I wouldn't have went back a 4th time, but I went to Japan to wrestle with cultural exchange team with Ron Jones and Gary Freeze, and or actually Ron Jones and Ira Fleckman. And but it's just it was one of the things that was one of the most influential things I've done in my life is go to that camp. So
Isn't
I
that
went.
the one where you sleep on the floor the whole time you're in the gym?
No, this one, I mean, it's when I did it, it was at University of Northern Iowa. That's where they held it, even though it was Jay's camp. And I think that was the year that Jay was leaving Iowa. That's why they had it at Northern Iowa, because he left Iowa and was, I think, didn't commit to Minnesota for a couple years, but that's why they had it at Northern Iowa. But we were in the dorms. We were doing, it's 4 practices a day. And we had this little card that, a square card that said BLD 7 times on one side, 7 times on the other. And you just, I mean, you get a little punch. When you get the beat, we go to breakfast, you get a punch. You go to lunch, you get a punch. You dinner, you get a punch. And you just couldn't wait to turn the corner. And I mean, it was so hard. I mean, they give you, it's a point system. They give you, positive and negative points. And you got to have a certain amount of points to get your I Did It shirt. And it's pretty cool. I mean, it's hard as hell. And I went up there with my guys for the last week of camp 4 summers ago. And I did the whole camp with them the last 7 days. And then I ran the 15 miles with them. Let me say, as a 40-something-year-old, that was tough. And so
I can imagine.
But, watching my guys go through it, especially my son, I mean, and you want to do it, you want to help him, but you got to let him go through it. And watching him suffer was, it was rewarding and a cool thing to do. But then you sit and it's like, crap, my son's, suffering, and you don't want him to suffer, but you gotta let him do it, and you gotta figure out a way.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that I hope the world can find a way to defend against this COVID thing, and we can all get back to some sort of normalcy. But
yeah, amen to that.
And I know with from what I heard about J. Rob and being in the dorms and being close knit and stuff like that, it's gonna I'm sure he's having a tough time convincing people on that right now, as everybody is, right? But so good. So Lance has been on the high school team the last 2 years.
Well, there was a point when he was playing Pop Warner football his last year, and they were in a playoff game, and he kind of got his bell rung, and he was wanting to go back in. And I think someone had fed him. I don't know if it was a couple other coaches saying that you could go over to Imagine School of Northport, which is a junior high, senior high program, and wrestle there as a underclassman, like 8th grade, 7th grade, 6th grade. And he was just adamant about not doing it. And then when he got in that Pop Warner football game, and it wasn't even talked about for months on end, and he was mad that he wasn't going to go back in. And he says, if I don't ever go back in, then tomorrow which would be Sunday, we're starting wrestling, and I'm going to go to Imagine. So he ended up actually going over to Imagine that year, but they wouldn't let him transfer over until January. So he missed out on practice from November all the way through the January 8th. So he wrestled January 8th all the way through the end of the year. So he had a month worth of the regular season. Then he wrestled districts, regionals, and he did great. I mean, he wrestled a couple kids that were state champions. He wrestled Stone from Venice. But he ended up making it to the semifinals, regionals, was in the finals of districts. I think by the time he got to regionals, he was ranked, but there were 4 or 5 studs at regionals, and short end of the stick. And but everything that I had hoped that he would get out of that year to help him once he got in high school came about. So I was really excited for him. And then his freshman year, did great job. He was 55-11. I think 8 of his losses were to state champion. Lost to Johnny Lovett, lost to some really good guys. And then this last year had a phenomenal year. It was undefeated going into the state finals and lost to a stud from Lake Highland Prep, Bailey Flanagan, who's a great kid. And, back to the drawing board, got 2 more
Yeah,
years
it
left.
was,
So.
I know, unfortunate for Lance, but it was really good. It was really good to see Bailey win it. He's just such an amazing kid, and he's come so far just in the year I've seen him. But from what the families and parents in the wrestling community tell me, it's been an uphill battle, and he's finally made it. So.
Yeah, I know. I know he placed a couple years ago at 138, if I remember, and then he got hurt and was out. But yeah, I followed him. He had a good year. I know he wrestled in some really tough tournaments and did well. I think he placed at Ironman. But it was good. But Lance's year was a struggle in many ways because in January, the first week of January, he ended up getting the flu, and someone even I saw you had Googs on there.
Yeah.
He had mentioned maybe it was the COVID, and I don't know, but it stayed with him for a month and a half. I mean, he really struggled. He his minimum weight was 161.5, and he wrestled 170. And I think one of the first practices that he came back from sitting out for a little bit, he was 159. So he was below what his minimum was. So it took some time for him to get back into the swing of things, and just to know that he found a way to win even through all that was what I saw, and it was a cool thing.
Yeah,
so I was happy that he got to the finals and got to experience that, and I know that it's going to make him even that much more committed to want to win it. So
yeah, and I talked to Brendon Abdun, and he had lost it, and then he won it, and I reached out to Coach Walker, and he said ask him what losing that one really did for him and how it got him better. So it obviously,
if you're competitive, I mean, and it stings. I mean, it'll be a fuel to the fire. Cool thing. I watched your interview with Brendon, and Lance was on his cadet national dual team that they traveled over to. I think it was in Spokane or somewhere out there, but they got to be teammates there for a couple weeks. It was kind of cool.
Awesome. So, I think we got through Dad and Coach and Lance, and that's awesome. And I know you could probably talk about your son as I could talk about mine for hours. But at some point, we got to talk about your program and your culture and what you're building there, and how important it is to you to kind of build your youth programs to also guide and feed into your high school and just to grow Florida wrestling altogether. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, when I first took over, one, you got to have the support of the school, and I'm community driven. I love my school, love Lemon Bay. I mean, if you've never been down to this side of Florida, our school is it's beautiful, and I got a lot of key people that are in the school that support what we're doing. And when I was hired, the athletic director, his son was one of my wrestlers. And then I actually wrestled with my athletic director back when we were in high school. And then the principal is someone that my brother graduated with. And so there's a lot of people that are within the school that, have given us the resources and the support. I know that a lot of times you don't have that at schools. So couldn't be more blessed than to have the people that are there for what we're doing. But I jumped in there and did what my high school wrestling coach, I had he's in the Wrestling Hall of Fame, Walt Reagan. And, he was a great mentor. I mean, he built the program from nothing and ended up, I think right now we have 19 or 20 plus state champions, and they were all from his era. And then,
Wow.
And then we've got probably another 20 or 30 state place winners. And then Walt ended up winning 2 state titles but I just watched what he did and how he, ran the program and had, good booster club and parents helping out. And, it's important that you have people that are there supporting their kids and helping to grow the program. Now, where we probably struggle is building a club. I have Scotty Bootfiller was our last state champion back in 2006. He jumped in there and started working with the youth club, but it takes time to build. And we're off the beaten path. And I know that there's some great clubs around here. Evan Robinson at Charlotte does a great job. Googs does a great job at Manatee. I don't know the culture in our area. It's trying to convince the parents why wrestling is such a great sport to be a part of, especially if your kids are wanting to play football. But it takes time, and you gotta just try and get the kids to sell to get their friends out, and that's kind of what we're doing right now.
Your kids on that side of the coast, they want to surf.
Yeah, well, the cool thing is I ended up having a really, really young team this past year, and I had maybe 6 or 7 that were in our lineup that were rightfully should have been on JV, and they jumped in there. And I mean, talking about trial, by fire, throwing you into the fray. And I'm excited for what's to come, because we have some young kids in there. They were freshmen, and they took their lumps this past year. Many of them did. And but you just watch them grow over the season and get better. And one of my favorite matches of the year, we have a kid named Chase Alden, and he came for about a month and a half leading into the season and lost like 25 pounds and wrestled 182. And I think his record was like 33-31, or almost 50%. And he got killed by a kid early in the year. I mean, just destroyed, pinned. Well, we're wrestling them again about a month and a half later in a dual meet tournament, and he's losing like 19-8 with about 20 seconds left, stands up and throws a kid in the most highlight reel head throw and pins him. And so it's you see these guys fighting and getting better, and good things are coming, I think.
Yeah, and some of these kids I talked to, you've seen. I don't discriminate. Anybody's welcome. You can be Spencer Lee, Yanni D, Julian Ramirez, or you can be, a sophomore in high school. I'm cool with it, right? Let's talk, right? And some of them will say, I'll ask them, what was their most memorable match, and they'll go back to a match where they lost to some kid, but they felt themselves getting better, and then they wrestled that kid again, and maybe they got him or they got closer to him. So there's always that turning point, they tell me. But yeah, so you've been obviously wrestling in the state of Florida since what, like the 80s, no?
Yeah, I was originally from Michigan, and I grew up. I might listen to you talked to Charlie Morgan the other day. His brother David was a NCAA finalist, and both from Michigan, and that was where I grew up, as my old stomping grounds. But we moved away, and we found our way down here in 81 or 82, and didn't really know that. I started wrestling in the Cobra Club up in Michigan with Jim Pushman back in, I think when I was 5 or 6 years old. My brother was kind of a phenom when he first started, and I just was someone who was tagging along until he started winning all his medals, and I'm like, I got to do this. And but when we came down here, I really didn't know that wrestling was going to be my thing until I kind of did what Lance did. I started wrestling in, I think, 8th grade. We didn't have a junior high school, so we were in high school from 7th through 12th. And so I was able to make the varsity team as an 8th grader. My brother pinned me at 100 pounds, so I had to go wrestle 107. And by the time districts came, I think it was 110, and I weighed maybe dripping wet 92, 93 pounds. And I ended up, all I wanted to do was just make it out of districts, because I can end up going to regionals and get out of school. So
Yeah.
I ended up taking 4th in districts, and then next thing you know, I'm in the semifinals of regionals. And I ended up making it to state as an 8th grader. So it was I think I knew I was going to start wrestling. So wrestling was my thing.
That's awesome, man. Congratulations. So obviously over these last 20 something years, how far have you seen Florida wrestling come, and how far or what needs to be done for us to maybe finally get a college to step up and put a D1 program down here?
I looked at Pennsylvania, just to take a state that's a hotbed for wrestling. I think they've got between Division I, Division II, Division III, over 30 schools, colleges, universities that have wrestling. And here in Florida, kids aren't going to leave to go and see if they're good. Like, you may not get some of the kids here in state that are that took third or fourth in state and leave the state of Florida and forego maybe getting the Florida Bright Futures or whatever, the scholarship money, in-state tuition or whatever, that would be easier for them to go to school. So they don't know if they could get good at wrestling. And I'll give you an example. Eric Smith, who was a stud, he followed me up at Ohio State. He wrestled 158 and two-time All-American, a semifinalist a couple times in the nationals. I mean, I think the best he did was, I think, third in state but he had the opportunity to stay in state and be able to see if he got good at wrestling. And he came to Ohio State. Kids here in Florida don't have that, and and to leave may not be the best thing for them. So in Pennsylvania and Ohio and some of those schools, you get a lot. I mean, wrestling is what it is. I mean, that's what they do up there, but they know that they could stay in state and still progress, because some kids don't start wrestling until they're maybe 9th or 10th grade, and then they see that they're getting good, and then they go off to college and get great. And we don't have that here. And until that happens, you're going to get kids that probably could do well in college. They'll never find out if they will, because they stop wrestling and they just stay in state and go to school. But something's got to give. I mean, if you can look at some of these other states, I mean, you look at Michigan, they got Central Michigan, they got Michigan State. You look at Pennsylvania, you got Penn State, you got Clarion, you got all these schools that have wrestling. I mean, you got 4 or 5 of the biggest power football programs in the country: Florida, Florida State, Miami, UCF now. I mean, South Florida. I mean, to say that you can't do that, I mean, I don't know. And maybe the girls wrestling and women's wrestling will help build that. And over time, with the gender equity, maybe that's the thing that's going to help save and maybe grow some of the programs. Who knows?
Now, not to take away from any of the NAIA, but look at the quality of wrestling athlete that our NAIA schools are getting now.
I know, it's crazy good.
What a D1 school would get here.
Yeah, I know. I mean, who's the kid from Mariner? Oh God, Coach Peterson's going to be mad at me here in a second. I'll think of the name, but he's at a junior college right now. I mean, there's some studs here. I think he was ranked number 1 in the country in junior college. But from Mariner. But yeah, we got a lot of good wrestlers. I hear you talk about it, that we're 1 or 2 deep in the state, and I think our state could match up with a lot of different states if we put our cream of the crop together. I mean, look at Lake Highland Prep. I mean, they're competing all over the country and doing great. And I mean, you look at their lineup and who's in college right now. I mean, they've got a lot of guys that are off wrestling Division I right now. I mean, you got guys like Anthony Artolona at Penn. I mean, you got guys Joey Silva at Michigan. I mean, there's some great wrestlers out there.
Yeah, and I mean, how awesome would it have been to, who's to say, right? But some of those kids would stay home. I mean, some kids have dreams, like you grow up a football kid, you want to play for the Hurricanes or for Notre Dame or for Michigan, right? But you grow up as a wrestling kid, maybe you want to go Penn State, Ohio State, Iowa or something. But if Miami Hurricanes football was built on a guy that came down and said, you know what, I'm just going to walk into these inner cities here in Miami and tell kids, let's build our own house. And
right,
what happened. So, I mean, imagine a UCF or an FIU or a Florida State or whatever being able to walk into. I mean, look at the schools and the programs that I'm learning about and that you've known about that are down here, and they're feeding these colleges. The other thing is the gentleman up at Florida State that's got the Florida State Club. He said one thing that would really help would be to get a junior college programs going throughout the state.
Yeah.
What's your opinion on that?
Well, it's got to start somewhere. I mean, someone's got to drop the stone in the pond, so the ripple effect starts, branching out. I mean, I think one of the things that the schools in regards to the Title IX, I'm not too keen on the numbers of all the schools and where they're at, but that seems to be the sticking point, as to why schools aren't. It's not money. I mean, because if you look at some of the schools over the last couple of years, like Texas and LSU, you see how much money is invested in the locker rooms. I mean, they got $30,000 per locker for each football player. I mean, it's state of the art televisions. I mean, all this stuff that, I mean, it's crazy. I mean, what the money that's invested in these programs, I mean, that's enough to fuel, multiple programs. I mean, so it's not about money. It's just about being equitable and balancing, the male female population with it. And it's a head scratcher to me as to why schools can't do that. And
Yeah, and I would say, a lot of these schools, like and I apologize if I talked over you. Sometimes there's a delay.
No, that's all right.
If I cut you off, keep going.
No, you're good.
All right. Sometimes people say I talk over people, but I don't mean to sometimes. With the internet, sometimes there's a delay. Also scholarship wise, I mean, look, we all know the politics in college sports, right? And these football teams that are able to give track scholarships seem to be doing okay, right? So, you could have a kid that is a really good wrestler that may be a decent football player, but you're not sure, but you still want to have him at your program. How awesome would it be to have 14 wrestling scholarships to give out, or 12 or 10 or whatever they do, even if they're not full boats, at least you're bringing kids in for the education, right? And then also you have the opportunity to make your linemen better, make your defensive line, offensive line. I don't know. I may not know what I'm talking about, but I think I'm on the right track.
Well, I God bless the people that are two sports stars. I mean, it was hard enough to manage one. I mean, college was hard. I listened to your podcast with Nordstrom and talking about the weight cutting. I mean, I came from an era where weight cutting was allowed. I mean, where we were sitting in saunas. I walking around, I weighed over 180 going into the year. And I think my senior year, I had a diet and exercise class where I, in October, right when the season started, after wrestling practice, I went and did an underwater body fat test. It was part of what I had needed to do. And I think my body fat was, I weighed 177 or 177 and a half. And I was 5.2% body fat. And I got down to 158 still. So I would start on a Monday, probably 12, 15 pounds over. And by Tuesday or Wednesday, I would start, sitting in the sauna with plastics, riding the stationary bike, and then doing it all the way through for 4 or 5 days. So the amount of work that went in, especially for me in that era, was hard. And I don't know how anybody could have been able to do two sports, but if kids can get into school doing it and massaging, getting a scholarship in one sport for another, then God love them.
Yeah. Hey, I'm sure it doesn't happen, right?
Yeah, right. No, some of the schools that do really well, they got some great recruiters, and you can be a great coach, but if you're not a good recruiter, you're not going to have the team that you want.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, hey, this is, I'm just honored to talk to you, man. This is amazing. You've had a big, huge career so far through Ohio State, through Florida, and you're one of those coaches in the state of Florida that have really grown this sport from, to where it was to where it is. So from me, I just want to say thank you. And I love what everybody in this community is doing. And with that being said, I'm going to hit you with these 10 questions. I've got
Okay.
a couple of of pretty good wrestlers coming on behind you in Danny Martinez and Sebastian. I'm going to totally mess up his last name, so I'm not going to try. But two pretty good guys out of Southwest Miami. So
I know Danny. Well. I've been following him. His dad, I coached at Georgia State for a couple of years, and I've been following Danny. Danny's a stud.
yeah, talking to Mick Ortega, man, what a quiet assassin he is over there at Southwest, huh? He just
Yeah, they've got a great program.
keeping himself in the shade.
Yes.
All right, so I know the part of the state you live in. I know it well because I love coming to that side of the state. So let's go Sarasota Beach or St. Pete Beach.
You know what? I'm a homer for Inglewood Beach, but if I had to choose, I mean, I'm going to go to Siesta Key Beach. They got the white powdery sand.
I like it. So I've looked up a couple of like good spots, I guess, to eat over on your side, and so hopefully you've eaten at one of these two. But Snooks Bayside or Farlow's on the Water.
Well, I'm friends with Keith and his wife. I mean, I've known him since I've been back here in Inglewood last 10 or so years, but and worked with him. He's a good dude, and I'm going to go with Farlow's. I'm a loyal guy, so I'll stick with Farlow's.
I like it. This will help me too when I come down to Sarasota area.
Yeah, you'll have to go. Their restaurant. They got good food, great food.
So St. Armand's or Lido Key?
I'm gonna go with St. Armand's. They got a lot of stuff going on around there, so I'd go there.
Pretty cool. I like Columbia right there in the circle.
Columbia. I was gonna say Columbia. I worked for a pharmaceutical company for 10 years, and I had a lot of dinners at Cafe La Rope and a couple other restaurants out there on St. Armand Circle.
Yeah, and the downtown St. Pete, so my wife and my kids are all born in the month of September. So for the last 7 or 8 years, we've been going down there in September for their birthdays. So I'll have to hit you up next time I go down. And the downtown St. Pete has really, downtown Sarasota has become kind of a little hotbed now with all those little restaurants. It used to just be Kiki's, and now
it's nice.
So do you go seafood or steak?
I'm neither. I'm more of a chicken guy. I'm not a big eater. I'm not. You probably got somebody that's on the low end of the spectrum of eating. But if I had to choose, I'd probably go with steak. Out of the two.
So lobster or stone crabs? Either one, huh?
I don't know. I'm going to stick with the surf or the turf. I'm going to go with steak.
How about beer? Do you drink beer?
No, I was just telling somebody the last time I ever drank a beer was, and I know this because I'm not a drinker, but I was sitting at the Greater Fenton Inn in Michigan, and it was the night that O.J. Simpson took off in his Bronco. And I remember it because I was sitting there waiting for my folks to come meet me with another couple and eat dinner. And I wasn't a big drinker, but every time if I did drink a beer, I would start bloating. So I stayed away from it. But I remember sitting there drinking a woodpecker cider, some exotic beer. That was the last time I drank. So I would not be able to answer something.
Alfred Sands said, Sebastian, the last name is pronounced Malguizo, and he split it up in 3 different cities. Thank you, Alfred. I was going to mess that up. All right, headgear or no headgear?
I got both cauliflower wearing headgear, so I'm going to say I'm get rid of the darn thing.
Freestyle or folk style?
If we go freestyle, back when I was competing, I'll go with freestyle. The rules have been it's like someone went in the room and said, you know what, we're going to decide a match by grabbing a ball out of a bag, or just the dumb rules. And until they change the rules, I like what they're doing so far, but they're still they have ties now. And, you got to wrestle, you got to finish the match. And that's my opinion. If it's 7-7, someone scored a 3-pointer versus a 2-2-pointer, you got to finish the match. So but I like the way that
bring in overtime to freestyle.
Oh God, yes. And you know what? The one thing that I don't like about freestyle they do now is that they stop the matches every 5 or 10 seconds. It's like you can't get any continuity wrestling, and it's like tweet, like a blow the whistle, tweet, blow the whistle. You you train to get in shape so you can go wear on somebody and control what you can control. If I train harder than you and I can bring that to a wrestling mat, then I have a better advantage of you. But they stop it all the time. So they're getting better, but they got to have overtime, and then they've got to stop blowing the whistle all the time. But I'm going to go with free.
How about 32 or Fargo?
I wrestled in the finals of the Junior Nationals, which is now Fargo, back when I was a senior in Greco. And I just started doing the Super 32 with my son. I jumped back into wrestling. The Fargo's a beast, man. I mean, there's so many. I mean, I think the chart I had over 150 guys in my weight class or so, or 100 and some odd guys in the weight class. And I know that most of these tournaments are, but I know it's a long answer. I'm going to probably go with, because I'm sticking with freestyle. I'm going to go with Fargo.
Yeah. And East Coast wrestling or West Coast wrestling?
East Coast meaning in Florida?
No, East Coast. So Florida all the way up to the Northeast, or California, Oregon, Washington, that whole area. I don't know. I just made the question because I had a food question there, and you told me you don't eat much, so I crossed it off.
Well, you know what? I'm down here in SEC territory, so I always get the whole thing like the SEC is better than the Big Ten, and it's like constant. And maybe the SEC is, but I'm a Big Ten guy, and so if maybe we'll keep it to that. I'll just say I'm a Midwestern guy in Big Ten.
So we'll say Midwest wrestling.
I'm Midwest wrestling, yeah. Until the Florida, steps up to the plate and gets Miami, Florida State, and the other colleges with wrestling, I'm a Big Ten guy.
That's awesome, man. That's great. Did I tried to put down some good questions so you could talk about your program and your club and your kids. Was there anything that I missed? Was there anything that you really wanted to make public or talk about that maybe I didn't?
No, I mean, I know this is a great platform for a lot of young kids that are probably watching you. I know you've interviewed a lot of them. You're going to be interviewing Danny next, and a lot of these guys have a desire to wrestle in college and do well in college. I knew that I wanted to wrestle in college from a young age. I knew probably when I was in 8th grade I was going to wrestle in college, and I was undefeated my last 2 years, and going to college, it was a wake-up call. I mean, everybody was good. The walk-ons were good. The people that were there, not on scholarship, but were there, were good. I mean, the juniors, seniors were good. So you had to figure out how to compete. And I was a good wrestler, but I think my greatest asset was I wanted to succeed at wrestling. And these kids, if they have that desire to want to go do it and wrestle in college, I mean, they can do it. I mean, you look at some of these guys that are state champions down here, their pedigrees there. They just got to be willing to want to go and work their tails off,
Yeah, and I know that the conversation is big about bringing a D1 school to Florida, and it's more about growing wrestling in Florida than it is about D1 is a better college than whatever. It's not about education. We're just trying to get more schools at a higher power so that we can get wrestling. But in reality, what I've liked and I've tried to do is also bring on NAIA coaches and club coaches and Division III coaches, because, let's be honest, there's only a small percentage of these kids that are going to wrestle Division I, just like in the football field, just like on the basketball court, just like there. And they need to see these amazing coaches that are out there and these amazing programs that are out there. And they're all amazing. Just because one says D1 and one says NAIA doesn't mean you're not going to get huge opportunities to grow your life and be better. And I've had some parents say, man, thanks, because they're getting to know these coaches just through this platform, and it helps when they start going on these recruiting trips. So I hope that I'm making a difference,
Yeah, well, thank you for doing what you're doing. And, Florida wrestling, we talk about all the time, like we got to have this, we got that. We got some, I mean, wrestling in this state is good. I mean, I think that we've had 3 national champions, if I can remember right, Chris Bono, Franklin Gomez, Dwight Gardner from OU. You know, my junior year in college, there were 4, and they made a point of saying this when we were there, but there was 4 of us that were All-Americans in the same year. It was the most that Florida had ever had. I think we had an All-American the year before in Brett Gustafson. But, you know, I'm a product of a lot of coaches. Ron Jones, I'm a product of Gary Freeze, my high school coach. I mean, we had some great coaches that were wanting to help. And I think that the more that we have here in the state, where we've got coaches that are willing to help anyone and everyone, you know, we're going to get better, you know.
Well, and I believe, I believe in my heart and my stomach that Lugo would have won one this year.
You know what? I would have been interesting to see. I'm an Ohio State guy, and they had a close one with Sasso.
Yeah,
but
twice.
I would like to have seen it. I really would have. That would have been a great match.
Yeah, and I think Sass is going to do big things. And then, speaking of Ohio State, and I know we just keep going because I just love talking. But how about a kid like Echemendia come in there, and then I had him on, and he's like, you know, I've never said this before, but I had never competed Greco, and the coaches at Fargo were like, hey, just try it. He's like, I never done Greco before. And he ends up winning the whole damn tournament at Fargo. It wasn't like he was at a Greco tournament locally at a high school gym.
Well, I went to Japan my junior year with Ron Jones and Ira Fleckman. Solomon Fleckman was one of the best wrestlers that came out of Florida. He was a 3-time state champ, an All-American at Lehigh, and he was a dual champ at Fargo. But we went to Japan, and as soon as we got back from a 3-week trip to Japan, landed in Tampa, we got in a car with Gary Freeze and drove to Upper Iowa University. And, you know, I was only going to be wrestling freestyle. And Gary Freeze and a couple others, you know, they harped on me to wrestle Greco. It's like, I'm not wrestling Greco. I've never wrestled Greco before. And I remember wrestling. I was like 10 or 12 over, and I ran in the cornfields with Gary Freeze a couple days in a row so I could make weight. And I wrestled Greco, and I think I took 9th. That's when they had the good mark system back in the day. It wasn't a bracketed tournament, and it made me want to come back. And I wrestled in the finals the following year, but I had 2 years of Greco. And I like what he said. Wrestling's wrestling. When you just wrestle, you figure it out, you know. And I'm excited to watch him wrestle over the next.
Yeah, he said, you know, I had nothing to lose. So he said, when I went into the matches, I was just like, you know, if I win, I win. If I lose, I lose. I never done this before. And he said, next thing he knew. So it's fun. And I'm sure having a personality like that in the room is going to be great. And listen, please, anybody you know that you think would be great for this platform, please share my link. Please have them come on and book with me. It's been incredible. I'm 2 weeks booked out. I could have never imagined. I do 4 shows a day, 20 shows a week. I had 20 booked this week. I have 20 already booked next week. The following week is starting to get booked up. I have no words. I can't explain how appreciative I am for the support. You can see I don't even have a background yet. I just have this little, and I'm just trying to do the best I can. And it's just amazing. So anybody that you know or you think of that you want to send my link to or my page, please do.
Yeah, I got my assistant coach was a 3-time All-American at University of Minnesota in the 90s, and his son was my state runner-up 2 years ago.
Yeah, I'd
he would
love
be a
to
good
talk
one.
to him. Great, just have him hit book. There's a little button there, book now, and then please feel free to go onto my page and share our interview. When I put it on YouTube, I'll send you a link to it as well. And then please give me a review. So anybody out there who's been on my show, I started messaging people this morning. Please go on and on my page and give me a review. It's just going to help my page grow and do things like that. So thank you so much, and have a wonderful day. And if Lance ever wants to come on the show, I'd love to have him too. And
all right,
that would be fun.
Cool. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you very much, and have a good day too.
Yes, sir. Take care.
See you. Bye.